everyone. Welcome to the platform of Practical Cities. Practical Cities is an initiative for all urban enthusiasts who wants to learn on-ground practical solutions, which makes our city more livable and more sustainable. This time, our theme is water and sanitation, where we are covering major aspects of water and sanitation projects which are being implemented all over the world. So, in a recent survey, I read 95% of water which receives our home gets to the drain. Don't you think that's shocking? Definitely for me. To understand water reuse and its management more in depth, we have Mr. Manas Rath from BORDA with us. Hello, sir. Good evening. So,
Hello, good evening. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me here.
thank you, sir. It's our honor. So, Manas is currently working with BORDA to make our Indian cities more livable, sustainable, inclusive, and happy. He has worked with various organizations, NGOs, any social startups, and like CDD and Shelter Association. Also, he has set up $100 million water sanitation and waste management fund for which are focusing on water, wastewater, and waste management system. So he has also set up his career as a director at Dasra, and he's a co-founder of Blue Water company and is graduated from MIT and Sloan School of Management. So I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Manas sir to the platform of Practical Cities. Hello, sir. So, sir,
Hello, good evening.
so we have learned about water and its treatment about many years. So what are your views on it? And it is always said that decentralized model is very much better than the centralized one. What are your views on it? How Indian cities can work on that?
Great, excellent. It's a very good question. And it's nice that you are addressing this issue and looking at different aspects from the water side. Ajanath coming to talk about groundwater and the water supply side, and now looking at the wastewater side, which is called the second part of the water cycle. So let me share some slides, talk about the questions you have raised. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
So let's go here. Okay. Can you see my? Can you see the screen properly? Yeah. Okay. Great. So let's talk about Indian cities. This is actually very close to my house in Bombay, and you can see that this picture is very telling. This is supposed to be a water nala that carries storm water to the sea. As you can see, it is got covered with garbage. Under that, there is black sewage. There are these, informal houses, slum, right along the channel. You can imagine what kind of health problems they have in terms of mosquitoes, polluted water. Of course, all their toilets connect directly into this, so all the raw sewage is into the ocean, a couple of kilometers down. And then right above this, you've got these high-rise apartments, which are actually pretty expensive apartments, right? So this is not like the middle of nowhere. It's not a low-income area. But this very strange dynamic happening in all our cities, where we have become okay, in a sense, living with shit right in our neighborhood, right under our noses, right, and that has to change. Uh, so urban India, we had about 450 million people in 2019, 600 million people in Indian cities in 10 years. It's a 40% growth. 15 to 55% of these currently live in slums, depending on which city you look like, 50, 55%, and 23 is the national average. And this itself is a ridiculous statistic that we have 23% of our urban population, that's over 100 million people living in slums. And what do our cities look like from a sanitation perspective? We have about 7,000 towns and cities. Only about 250 have got a sewerage system. 60% of these underperform or they are closed. 40 billion liters of untreated sewage is flowing into the environment every day across. There's the Ganga, it's the Arabian Ocean, it's the any river, Yamuna, wherever, right? And pretty much 0% of wastewater is captured, treated, and reused. There is unsafe reuse that happens when their sewage is directly used in agriculture, for example. That's a kind of reuse, but it is unsafe reuse, right? Because we're not removing the polluted quality of food, for example. So untreated sewage is a health, environment, and a livelihood crisis, and it has to be treated as this sort of problem. Now, 22 of 32 of our largest cities face water shortages of 10 to 40%. Right? So we know India is one of the most water-stressed countries in the world. The severe groundwater problem, and therefore climate change becomes a big issue for our people, right? And then, so we need to look at sanitation and water integrated manner, and that's what we'll try and think about today. Okay? Now, if you look at sanitation, this is a study done by FSG, where they talk to people living in slums of India, and if you look at it, the number one thing people wanted, 44%, they wanted better toilets. And this is from 2018-19, right? This is not like pre-Swachh Bharat, right in the middle of Swachh Bharat mission. Even the 44% wanted better toilets. They wanted household toilets, better toilets. 36% wanted water, better water supply. 30% wanted drainage systems because flooding is a big problem. And then you had garbage collection and you had improvement in water quality. So if you look at the top 10 things that people in slums want, 5 are direct water and sanitation, right? So that's pretty telling about what a big problem we have. Now let's start with centralized systems. This is what everyone is. These are the large sewage treatment plants, the large sewer networks that get built in big cities. That's the 200 cities in India which have partial sewer networks. So typically the sewage treatment plants will be from 20 million liters a day to 80 million liters a day and more. The biggest is, I think, about 1 million liters a day is under construction in Nagpur. Delhi is building one which is even bigger. The sewer networks which go under the road are 90% of the total. STP, the sewage treatment plant, actually is not the biggest cost. Right? Digging up the roads, laying these pipelines. It's very expensive because the government builds all of this, whether it's the Amron and URM or whatever, JICA, ADB, but the government is basically spending all this money. It's expensive. If it fails, there's a huge cost. From two perspectives, one is of money on it, and that money goes to waste. But secondly, now imagine, in this plant up here is a 200 million liters a day sewage treatment plant. And if that, it means at that one point, you're going to have 200 million liters of sewage coming in, and there's nothing that can be done about it, right? So you can imagine the kind of large point pollution you're going to create in case of failure, right? And the cost of failure is very, very high. How do you reuse so much water? You've taken this water to one place, now you have to pump the treated to all these different places so it can be reused. So again, the process of reuse also becomes very difficult because this is a very big treatment plant in one location. But this is what engineers learn. They are familiar with it, they have built it, there is history, and therefore they're very comfortable doing this, even though there are clear shortcomings and drawbacks. And there's a whole complete ecosystem around this. Right? There are designers, engineers, quality assurance, operations and maintenance companies, and so it's very easy in a sense. It's very easy, even if it is not the best solution at all times. So for example, a lot of money is being spent on this, right? So Navi Mumbai, they found in 2016 that newspaper article said in Navi Mumbai, treated water is going down the drain, but that continues to happen today. In Hyderabad generates 1,850 million liters a day of sewage, treatment capacity 772 ml. The remaining 58%, over 1,000 billion liters a day, is going into the river and the lake without treatment. Mumbai has planned a 847 MLD treatment plant, which will cost 1,500 crores, right? So it's not a small thing, it's a big project. Pune is building 11 ST with 280 MLD, which will cost 900 crore rupees with a loan from JICA. And then in 2017, Mumbai decided to plan 6 STPs, which will cost 4,500, big project. Right. Just one more thing I forgot to add. Now, for example, when we talked about the big sewage treatment plant in Bombay in the earlier slide, right, for 847 million liters a day. Now, Bombay, a lot of new research is showing that Bombay is the west coast of India is going to become, due to higher and higher risk for massive storms and hurricanes. And we have seen what has happened in Louisiana, in the US, in New York, in other parts of the world. We have seen tsunamis that have hit. And you can imagine what happens when a tsunami, if a tsunami comes and hits this STP, which has got almost 1,000 million liters, a billion liters of sewage, and all the through it, sitting right by the water, right by the seafront. You can imagine what kind of crisis you can have, right? So there's also, when I say there's a huge cost of failure, there's also a climate perspective. It will be around for the next 30 to 50 years. Mumbai is still using STPs, which were set up almost 80 years ago. Right? So now this is, let's look at the cost. If you look at centralized sewerage systems, it costs about 12,000 rupees to 25,000 rupees per capita to build. Okay. So if you take for a town of 1 lakh people, it will be 250 crores to build the sewer network and the STP. The annual operating cost will run at 2,000 to 4,000 rupees per person. Now we'll talk about decentralized system, but I just want to give you a sense of magnitude. A decentralized system, depending on what technology you use, can cost you between 4,000 to 12,000 rupees per person to set up. So it's a bit cheaper, half the cost. And it costs very low, depending on the technology again, it can be very inexpensive to operate, 1,000 rupees per person per year. And then we talk about fecal sludge management, which is even more decentralized. And that can be set up for as little as 400 to 1,000 rupees. Your operating cost is 60 to 100 rupees per person per year. Right? Very, very affordable, and therefore it is getting a lot of traction today in India. Every big city requires a combination of these solutions. Even a small city might require a combination. Technology is not the issue. We have more than enough technology. It really is about planning, regulation, enforcement, etc., which are the problem in India today. Right? There are enough countries we can learn from. There's enough successful studies, cases in India itself for us to replicate. Decentralized sewage treatment plants. This is where you have a small STP, typically ranging from 40,000 liters to maybe 1 or 2 million liters a day. We're not talking 100 and 500 million liters a day. Right? So they're small scale sewage treatment plants. They're ideal for bulk users of water. What's a bulk user? Any building that uses a lot. So a large apartment building, a large commercial building, educational campus, a hospital, a mall, which uses, let's say, 40, 50,000 liters. It's usually not very much a small household or a building with 10 apartments, right? It will just be very expensive on a per capita basis. But for large buildings and campuses, very, very affordable, a great solution. There are various different costs and different quality of treatment. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later. So you've got very simple, durable workhorses. Right? The most common technology, you've got the moving reactor, you've got the sequential batch reactor, you've got packaged MBBR system, which come in a container. You just literally put it into the hole or put it into the location, plug in the pipes, and we can install it in 2 days. You've got biological systems that require almost no electricity. They use nature-based solutions, and some of the options in India are soil technology, DBOTs, phytoread, etc. And then you've got very high-end system which will take your sewage and make it into drinking water. And this is the MBR technology, the most common. This is Singapore, which takes all its sewage and makes it into, or a lot of its sewage is converted into drinking quality water. Although they don't supply it back for drinking, but it's made into drinking quality water. There are 5-star hotels, there are office buildings in India which do this. Okay, so it's a very proven, established, but expensive. It's expensive. It takes a lot of energy. Automation in this business, because earlier you needed 24/7 manpower or human, people operating it, monitoring it, pressing a switch. Now a lot of this can be automated with internet, and therefore you can cut out your operator cost significantly, and the whole system becomes much more affordable than, let's say, even 2-3 years ago or 5 years ago. Okay. Now, if the water within your building or your campus, you need dual piping, which means you have a fresh water tank that comes into, let's say, a bathroom, kitchen, etc. Then you have the pipe from there, which goes to the sewage treatment plant. The water that comes out of the STP is then taken to a separate water storage system, and then is supplied to those taps or those points which can use treated water. So for maybe air conditioning, central air conditioning, landscaping, definitely. So then you have this dual piping system, and you can reduce your fresh water usage at a build 40 to 60%. And imagine if you do this at a city scale, you're basically, gotten rid of your water shortage problem, right? There'll be no day zero, there'll be no water stress. We can address this with land. But we have to remember that 80% of our water in India is used by agriculture. And until agriculture doesn't get more efficient, it's very hard to make India more water secure. But at least our cities start by taking care of their own water requirement. The question that comes up is, what do you do with the excess water? When you're taking, let's say, 100 liters of water, that becomes 95 liters of wastewater, as you said in the beginning. But for the reuse purposes, you may need only 40 or 50 liters, right, for flushing, gardening, landscaping. What do you do with that other 45 liters of which you have treated? And that needs to be somehow either used or released into the environment safely. Right? We'll talk about that. This is the best solution for government. They transfer the responsibility to the private. It doesn't cost them anything. They have to only do the monitoring, the regulations and enforcement. And yet even that is not happening today because of the regulatory enforcement is poor. Right? Now this is a chart to show the life cycle cost of small scale sewage treatment plants, and you can see at the bottom it goes from 1,000 liters a day, 40 KLD, all the way up to 700 KLD. This is a study we did with EWAG in Switzerland and IIT Madras at BORDA. And you see the different technology, biotechnology to DWATs to MBBR to MBR. You have a 4 to 5 times cost differential. And so depending on your affordability, your situation, technology that meets the affordability of a particular customer, right? And what we find is that if you look at a real estate project today, the STP cost will be less than 0.5 of the total real estate cost. So you can't even say, oh, it's too expensive for us to build STPs. That's not a good reason anymore. And the O&M costs are dropping every year. So it becomes more and more affordable, and really a matter of enforcement and people's responsibility to clean up our cities. So what are some of the problems and solutions? Some of the discharge norms for small STPs are very strict. STP is unaffordable because the STP you can only use a very high-end STP. And therefore we need discharge norms depending on capacity. If you have a 200 million liter plant, you need it to reach certain standards, because having 200 million liters of even slightly polluted water entering the environment can be disastrous, right? But if the same plant is doing 50,000 liters a day, the water is slightly polluted. In environmental science, as we say, you will get treatment through dilution. It will not be a crisis. And therefore, we should not be spending a lot of money doing high-end, small-scale systems. The reuse requires that. If you want to reuse their water for bathing, yes, of course, you need a high-end system, right? But in most cases, we don't do that. We still use fresh water for human contact purposes. So, second is zero liquid discharge. Why can't I sell the treated water, right? Sell it to construction, to industry, for landscaping, to municipalities, right? Instead of just forcing it to be down recharge or leaving it into the drain because of the zero liquid discharge norms. Today, builders were the ones who often install low quality STPs because they don't have to pay for them, right? They install the STP, they get their occupation certificate, they sell the real estate, they're out. But then it's the residents who come in, who have to then pay for this poor quality STP because you want to minimize their cost. And as a result of that, you have very high O&M cost, and it becomes a headache for residents, and then at some point they stop using the system. Is to create a reserve fund. When you buy an apartment or an office, you pay a certain amount of money which gets put into a fund, the interest from which will pay for the O&M cost. That's one solution. And then, of course, the monitoring and reinforcement, third parties can be used by the state pollution control boards and municipalities to report on deviations. Fake water tests is a big problem. Labs will give you a report without ever seeing the sample. And every small scale STP has to give a monthly water test report to the pollution control. And 95% of these are fake. So having an online and an automated system where you put in a sample and it directly reports the results could be one way, but you can just take more, test it, and say, oh, this is amazing. So there's still some things that need to be worked out. Okay. Now let's talk about neighborhood level decentralization. But right now what we talked about is in a private complex, right? And that's easier because it's like in my building, it's a common property, it's common ownership. But what happens when you go into the neighborhood, which is now public space, private, So here we need a different approach. It is still possible to have multiple small scale STPs around town. So in a city like Bombay, instead of doing, let's say, 20 STPs for a big city, you might want to do 300 small STPs, right? But this has its own complications. You can use different technologies and construction form depending on where the STP is, right? You can customize it to its neighboring conditions, future expectations of increase in use, environmental danger, flood blown, etc. So you have flex to choose different technologies. But it raises a challenge. Our water departments are used to managing very few centers. They want to run 5 treatment plants for water, 10 treatment plants for STP. We don't have a mechanism, institutional mechanism to oversee 300 locations or 100 locations, right? So it requires a new kind of administrative and sort of operational to come in for our Jal boards and our water nigams and storage boards to be able to manage this kind of decentralized approach. Now, if you look at the overall cost, this is this different sewer system. You've got feeder networks, trunk networks, pumping stations, and STP. All in all, if you look, the decentralized approach might actually be similar in cost to your centralized, right? Because you'll have either higher cost or more STPs, more small STPs, but you'll save money because the pipes will be smaller. So let's say your overall cost is similar. Okay, so you say, well, there's no cost, I go for this, because there are other advantages, right? You can build by locality. You don't have to do the whole city in one go. You can, okay, there's money to do it here, or the conditions are suitable. Let's do here. Next year we'll do that. Today, a centralized system can take 12 years to build, and so for 12 years, basically, you've dug the roads. People are frustrated. The pipes are there, and when you finally build the network and you the pipes you built 12 years ago are breaking, they're cracked, and they're creating problems, right? So whereas here you can literally go 2 years, one locality, and just keep building as they go. If some of the norms are changed, so currently the norms are designed for big networks, if the norms are changed, adapted for small networks, then you can actually reduce your costs quite significantly. And then you can reuse the water locally. Remember, we had that problem, say, if you have 200 million liters of treated water in one location, now, how do you pump it back to all the users who might want to use it, right? Whereas here, if you've got 2 million, 3 million liters there, 5 million liters there, you can use it locally for gardening, for flushing, for public toilets, and so on, right? Groundwater recharge, create water bodies, spaces, etc. Okay. Delhi is looking at this approach. 2018, the Delhi Jal Board announced that they wanted to set up dozens of small STPs. I haven't actually tracked it. I don't know what that is. But they did some experiments, and it was a very positive move. So here are some examples. This is from BORDA's work on DWATs, BORDA and CD. This is in a housing complex. There's a walking path. The flowers you see is part of the sewage treatment system. You can stand if people go for morning walks around it. There is no noise. It's a completely nature-based system. Costs almost zero to operate and maintain. Some gardener comes and takes care of it periodically, okay? And it working beautifully. Treated water goes back into these houses in the flushing system. So there's a full dual piping system in this complex. Right? This is a system we did for back in 2003, 2005. So eye hospital, this whole part is a part of the treatment system. And then this water is the tertiary treatment happens in this lake underground below these plants. They are all part of the treatment system. And then the water is actually used back in flushing the toilets inside the main hospital, right? So obviously that's from a pathogen perspective and so on. This is one where it just goes underground. Completely paved area, not much open space, no greenery, but you can build it as well. You can see the manholes over here. And this is what it looks like when you're building it, and then it gets covered. You can build parking on top of it, etc. So depending on the technology, these requirements will come up for how much. Okay. This is one system in Bangalore Metro. It's a prefabricated system, and literally the place looked like this almost 4 or 5 days later, a week later, let's say. The hoardings and all that we put up. But from this to this was literally a week, okay, because you're a prefabricated system. Now let's talk about a shit flow diagram idea. It basically says, let's look at a location, a city, a country, and say, where is wastewater being generated? Okay, so you see water closets, these are decentralized toilets which are connected tanks, they've got what we call on-site sanitation, they're not connected to a pipeline. And then you've got open defecation, right? And then the water flows to the systems, right? And it's transported either through pipes or through a truck. We'll talk about fecal sludge management. It gets treated, and then it gets either reused or disposed into the environment. For India, this was built in 2018 or 17 maybe. When we looked at India in 2025, we said that, you know what, even in 2025, given that a lot of action is happening on toilets with the Swachh Bharat mission, but not on the treatment side so much, still only 20% of our sewage is going to get treated before being discharged into the environment. And it's still going to end up in the domestic environment, agriculture fields, and water bodies without proper treatment, right? And therefore, building toilets alone is not sanitation. It does not solve our problem. Full value chain. So let me come to fecal sludge management. Now, 70% of urban toilets are connected to septic tanks and soak pits. Okay, this is across India. There are very few sewer networks. If these septic tanks and soak pits are poorly constructed, they start leaching pathogens into the ground, including into the groundwater. Okay, you can go to the wells nearby, groundwater, and containment units are cleaned. You have a desludging truck that comes. You can call them, and with the pump they suck out all. They clean out your septic tank. That's sludge, right? And this is typically what happens to it in India. Right? This is actually a photo one of my colleagues took, I think in Karnataka or Tamil Nadu. But this is a situation across India, and this is how wastewater, water bodies, and fecal waste is the #1 pollutant of water bodies in India today. Right? So if you look at the whole value chain, you've got toilets, septic, a truck comes and cleans it, takes it ideally to some sort of treatment plant. Once it is treated, then everything can be reused safely. So today we have got more and more toilets being built. Septic tanks are not getting much attention, so they require more attention. The quality of septic tanks is poor. The service of cleaning septic tanks and soak pits is available almost everywhere, either municipality or private. So the service may not be delivered in a very high quality way, but it's available, so it's good, it's fine. But treatment is the problem. There's almost zero treatment capability. This has changed because a lot of new fecal sludge treatment plants have been commissioned. But even today, the amount of fecal sludge that gets treated in India is a few percentage points of the total fecal sludge that are being generated, cleaned out by these trucks and dumped into the environment. Trucks sometimes go directly and discharge this on the land. So reuse happens, but most of the reuse is unsafe from a healthy perspective. So this is a treatment plant that we designed and built in Devanahalli, which is near Bangalore. It's near the Bangalore airport. There were a few objectives. It serves of 40,000 people. It's only about 7,000 square feet in area, so it's not a big plant. It doesn't require a big area. It costs less than 1 crore rupees to build. It is designed beautifully. You can go and sniff anywhere on this property and you will not smell sewage. It is designed very carefully, so there's no opposition from, not in my backyard, syndrome. And in fact, city governments have flown in residents to Devanahalli because people will obviously object to a fecal sludge treatment plant in my neighborhood. But when they come and see this, they get the confidence, yes, it can actually be done without smell, without nuisance. Right? This is how the truck discharges, picture I showed you. Right? It goes into a wall. Once it goes into that wall, it is never seen again. All right, till the end, and by the end, it is sanitized and cleaned and odorless. In Ladakh, this is a different system. Here, actually, the sewage is in the open because this plant is quite far away from habitation, and the climate of Ladakh, sort of justified this approach. But it may not work. It would not work in a densely populated city, right? But again, using a lot of nature-based systems to do the treatment. This is how the truck comes, discharge the sewage. You have a slight smell 45 minutes after the discharge happens. After that, there is no smell at all. So for most of the day, actually, there is zero smell, even though this is out in the open. Right? And this is a truck, nicely painted it says, happiness comes. Happiness doesn't come from what we get; it comes from what we give. Give us your shit, be happy. And the idea was to, make sort of sanitation services understand. It's done in the open. It's not done sort of by fly-by-night operators in the middle of the night, right? So now, we started a company called the Blue Water Company, and we provide fecal sludge management services in Leh. And this was the first public-private partnership contract done in India. So it's a turnkey FSM project. It is build, finance, operate, and then transfer. It's a 5+2 year integrated contract. So we also operate the truck that goes and cleans our septic tank. So we have an end-to-end responsibility of managing FSM in Leh. We got the Land Development Authority, and we had the treatment plant designed, built, and operational in 3 months. So it tells you can deploy this very, very quickly if the right players are involved, the government has attitude, and it's seen as a win-win solution. On the other hand, there are cities that have been trying this for 2 years. They've cancelled the tender 3 times because there's no trust, there is no thought, there's no planning. 2 years or 3 months to get this activated. It's a 12,000 litre per day plant, not very big. It uses a planted drying bed technology because it's a very easy to operate system. It collects user fees from the hotels. Hotels have to have the septic tanks cleaned every year, which is good for the groundwater. So they pay the municipality. Blue Water Company provides us, and at the end of the month, we are paid 90% of that 3,500 rupees is what we get paid. So 3,100 rupees for every septic tank or every hotel that we serve. Customer we serve, hotel, household, whoever. Other private players can come in, but they must bring the fecal sludge to the treatment plant and pay us a tipping fee. They can't go septic tank into the open and then charge a very low fee for it. It costs the government zero to set this up, right? And they retain 10% of the revenue, even though they don't do any of the service. And therefore, it's actually a profitable service for the local government. So it's a win-win for, in a way, everyone. Right? This is a flow chart, and the reason I put on this flow chart is that it gives a very clear supposed to do what are the options. If the septic tank is not accessible, what happens? We go a second time, and if the customer has still not made their septic tank accessible, then they are issued a notice and a fine. Right? The yellow is what the municipality does. The blue is what we do at Blue Water Company. But this kind of flow chart really helped us to design a very robust contract on who is supposed to do what happens if things do or do not happen the way they're supposed to, right? And that promoted a transparent conversation, not just between Blue Water Company, but also with the end customer. We could explain to them, this is how it will work, this will be the cost, this is the penalty, this is the benefit, this is who does each thing, right? And of course, it never worked exactly, but I would say we have probably been able to stick to 80% of this workflow over the last 3 years. This is the performance, in November to February, the system in Leh. But this is, we are averaging about 90 to 100 septic tanks cleaned every month. And this trend has continued through 2019 and 2020. Committee of Leh, earlier they used to provide this service. They used to clean 6 to 10 tanks every month. And so the question is, what was happening back then? Either they were under the radar players coming and they would dump the sludge somewhere, nobody knows. Or people were not getting that, they would just clean it out in a very inefficient way with local manual scavenging. So you see a big jump and therefore water pollution risk goes down significantly because these septic tanks are being cleaned out. They're not leaching as much into the ground. Okay. I'll just talk briefly about public-private partnerships. I know we're Uh, for the desludging trucks, there are multiple options. The government can buy the system and tell the private player, or they can tell the private player to buy and operate the trucks, the cleaning part of septic tanks. The fecal search treatment plant, party one can build it, party two can operate it, can build and operate it, which is obviously much better from accountability perspective. Or the private party can build it, invest in it, and operate it, kind of like what we have done in Leh. Right? We have done this, right? These two things. And then you have the integrated system, which is with the truck and the FSTP, where the government invests in the truck and the treatment plant and gives it to a private party to operate it. And the private party invest together, and the private party executes and operates. And in our situation, the government did not invest at all. The key reason there was for them to have budgets approved would take again, the project size was about 1.2 crores. We were willing to invest that money, and therefore it happened much more quickly. Okay. Now, the payment by the government can be fixed. They can say, okay, you get X, but that's not a great contract. So you want it to be at least activity or output based, which is our structure, where we get paid for every cleaning that we do. Right? Don't do the work, don't get paid. It will be a hybrid. Sometimes you want to have a minimum guarantee, so that at least certain infrastructure can be maintained, even if business is low for any reason, or there's a disruption. At least salaries and so on get paid, attractive to a private party. And you could go for outcome based. Where you say, okay, look, can you reduce groundwater pollution from this level to this level, right? And then it gives the private use whatever systems you want, whatever technology, but you have an outcome which you commit to, rather than just an activity or an output. But we're pretty far away from that in India, because it's very complicated. A lot of things will have to be agreed upon. So briefly on different types of public-private partnerships, I think it's very important to understand why do you want a PPP. There's a fashionable trend sometimes, or people think, oh, PPP is the solution to all the problems. We see inefficiency in government procurement and projects, and say, oh, PPPs will solve the problem. It's important to understand why do you want the PPP. And I would say there are three reasons. One is because of capital. You get private players to invest because the government may not have the money. The second is the know-how. The private parties bring a certain amount of knowledge which the government institutions may not have. And the third is responsibility, where the private player shares or takes up the responsibility of execution and operations, which the government may not be able to deliver upon, as we can see with a lot of unfinished projects and so on. Right? So once you know why PPP, which of these three, or it could be multiple of these reasons, then you can start designing the right kind of PPP structure. Okay? And transparency and accountability is very, very important. Otherwise, a PPP can just end up being a transfer of money from government to private parties without any improvement in the actual work. That's not the goal. So here are some. So the axis to look at it is on the x-axis. You have the risks and obligations from public sector to private sector and the obligations. And then from an investment perspective on the y-axis, again, who is making the investment and taking the financial risk. Supply and management is very simple. The government is done and they pay the private party to do it. So the obligation is completely on the private sector, and the investment is also completely in the public sector, even though the private sector is right. But the private sector is not taking on risk, obligation, or investment. And then you go to turnkey construction, where there's little more risk on the private sector, because if things don't get executed properly, but still the investment level is low. You have different kind of leases and concessions like BOT, DBOT, where the private sector is now taking much more accountability and risk. Investment is still, the government is still paying for a large part of it, right? So it's going more towards the private sector, but it's not completely the private sector domain. And then private ownership, if you just give a private player the right to offer a service, then they take on the full risk and obligation of doing the work. They also take on the full risk of investment. They're just getting a permission from the government to pay. And typically for these, at this end of the spectrum, you have short-term contracts, and these, as you get into more sophisticated PPPs, you want to have larger lots so that everyone's interests are aligned and people have a chance to, solve problems, find their feet, adjust if things are not working, and still make it profitable and for both sides. Okay. But the key thing is this: you have to really understand why do you want a PPP. That's very important. The hybrid annuity model is something that is getting a lot of attention these days. It's a structure that was popularized by the National Highway Authority of India. I won't go into the history of it. Hybrid of the engineering procurement contract and the build, operate, transfer model. So one of the issues with build, operate, transfer was the government told private players, build and you can collect tolls for the next 30 years and that's how you earn your profit, right? And the government just gave them the right to build the road. Now, traffic on these highways is much lower than expected, and so the private players were not recovering their money. And then they went to the government and said, look, this is not fair. People are not coming the way we expected. And of course, the government could have said, well, too bad, but then future investments in highways would stop, right? And that's what happened. Or they could say, well, we'll pay you. And that's kind of how this evolved. They said, okay, if toll collection, we will pay you that difference. But then what you're getting is, looking at the earlier this thing, you are getting an upfront investment by a private party to build the road, right? The private party is highly about operating the road and maintaining it. So if they don't maintain it well, there are penalties, right? And but yet the payment part, the government takes the capital risk, but at least they're getting know-how, predictable O&M from the private party, right? So that's the advantage to them. So now what happens is that if there's a project cost, and you look at this capital cost, right? The government will say, okay, if the project costs 100 rupees, let's say 100 crores, we will pay 40 crores of that, and the private party will invest 60 crores, right? And will also say, okay, now you not only have to build it, you have to also operate this asset, let's say a sewage treatment plant or a road or a water treatment plant or a solid waste management plant, whatever it is. Wait this for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, right? So now the moment this structure is set up, I'm going to build the system really well because I have to also run it for the next 10 years. I don't want it like constant and me incurring O&M costs, right? So I make sure that I'll do the job well. If I have to just build it, run it for 1 year and hand over, I'll try to take shortcuts because I want to keep my costs low. And as a private party. Here you're aligning sort of that long-term interest. Now what happens is that over the next, let's say 10 or 15 or whatever years, the government makes 3 kinds of payments to the private party. They make an annuity payment to repay the 60% that the private party has invested in the capex. That will be repaid back over 15 years. Okay, and there's an annuity payment or a monthly payment, which is fixed. You invested the money today, I will repay that to you over the next 15 years. You can't run away after 3 years because then you will lose that remaining money that you're not yet got, right? So it's payment, so that you remain invested in the project till the end, or at least close to the end. The government will also pay the O&M cost, whatever that might be, to operate the system. Because the party is investing, there will be some interest payment that is covered, interest cost on this upfront, this thing which is paid to the party, right? And so this is what the private party will invest X amount of the capex, and this is what I want every month or every quarter or every year as my annuity payment, and that's how the government can compare different bids and decide who to award. The government may collect fees, taxes from the service, but the O&M is completely done by the private party, and so there's a clear differentiation of okay. Benefit to the government is it reduces the initial investment. They pay only the services that are delivered as agreed upon. If after 3 years the private party doesn't maintain the system, right? The private party is fully accountable for the O&M because they have built the system, they have financed it, they are operating it. They cannot point finger at somebody else and say, oh, they didn't do it, so this one's fault. Completely your responsibility. And I think that's a big thing that the government needs and wants. But even if they don't want, they need it. The other next challenge, which is not really used much in India, there have been a few examples, not in sanitation, I don't think. But here a private party proposes an idea to the government. It's not a response to a tender solicited. So I can go to the government and say, you know what, this is the problem I'm observing. Here's the solution I can offer, and this is what it will cost. This is what I'll do, this is what it will cost. Now the government can't just award like that to a private party, right? So they then float a tender based on that. Say, oh, interesting idea. They now float a tender to invite competitive bids. And let's say many people apply saying, yes, we can do this for this cost, that cost, that cost. Now, obviously, that puts me as the original party. I've invested a lot of thought into making this proposal, maybe cost also. It puts me at a disadvantage. So now my people are just sort of bidding on it, right? So what the government does is it gives me an option saying that if there is a lower or a better bid than me, which comes in, original party, the original party has the opportunity to match those terms and win the contract, right? So it gives some potential, some option is there for the private party to put the original party to put their effort in to design a good system. Right? What are the advantages of this? It creates innovative ideas. People invest, they really put money into just coming up with an idea, but it's really studying it, investing in it, and coming up with a implementable solution, which you're willing to do if the government accepts it, right? So you can't just put anything on paper because to want it and you can't execute, then that's not good. Okay. What are the challenges? Sometimes comparing the original proposal and the new proposals that come in in response to the tender can be difficult. They may use different technologies, different solutions, different parameters. So the system, the process has to be designed so everything is comparable. Will new bidders come in? If I know that some very reputed company has already made this proposal, and tomorrow they have the chance to, even if I come in with a better idea or proposal, they have a chance to match it and take the project. I may not be willing as a bidder to put that energy and attention to creating a bid, right? So that's one concern. That will good quality bidders come forward, if they know that somebody else can match them anyways and take away the contract. And then, if will private parties put in their energy to really develop a good proposal if they have a small chance of winning it, right? So sometimes in some country, what they do is they say, if you don't win the proposal at the end of the day, we'll give you some reimbursement for coming up with the idea and so on. Right? It will cost, it's something, it's some incentive. But I think the Swiss challenge method can really be used very effectively in India. Okay, there are challenges, but it's something that we should explore, and it will bring out the kind of innovation have, and it also brings in the accountability, and there's a transparent bidding system. I want to close with a story which was very inspiring to me when I started my sanitation journey just ago. I'm not an environmental engineer. I've not spent my whole career in water and sanitation. But I heard this story about Lake Geneva from a lady who lived in Switzerland for many years. Lake Geneva, I think, is the largest lake in Europe. It's on the Swiss-French border. It's the area of Chennai and Mangalore put together. Very large lake. And in the 1940s, it was probably the most Europe. Many writers and artists used to go and spend their summers there, getting inspired. But then, housing started, farming started, shipping started, and the more and more poisoned. And by the 1970s, it was actually unsafe to swim in the water. Underground visibility was cut from 50 feet to 5 or 6 feet. And if you're close to the shore or close, probably even less than that, right? And this was over a period of 30 years. So, and this is kind of what we have seen in India today. But now, and by the 1980s, there was no fish in poisonous. There was absolutely no fish in the lake. So now what happened? Today, you can see people are swimming in it, beautiful blue color. So what happened? Switzerland together passed federal laws to protect the water. It was an international action, right? Scientists came up with options on what to do, so they brought in law. They made it illegal to dump untreated water, and so very, very strictly enforced in both France and Switzerland. So there's strong enforcement. They built a ring of treatment plants around the lake so that even if wastewater was seeping in, they would intercept it before it reached the lake and treat it. So they invested heavily in infrastructure, special boats to clear floating debris, floating waste, which is now not needed anymore, but in the initial days it was. So the focus on operations and maintenance. And today they're water, right? So you can see that from the 1980s when fish were dying to the about late 90s, in 15 years, through this kind of concerted and holistic, they were able to reverse a very large water body. And so the idea is that if we are not Switzerland, but if they can do it, surely we can do it if we put up political will, and our sensibility, and our attention to this. So to close, we need to address sanitation environment and our water crisis together. You cannot come up and try to optimize and solve it. It will not work. It is an integrated system. We need to address it in an integrated manner. Okay. The British Medical Journal, which is doctors and health professionals, they said a few years ago that the sanitation revolution has saved more lives than any medical intervention in history. Not antibiotics, not sanitation has saved more people. And today, when we look at hundreds of thousands of children dying of diarrhea in India, for example, or the kind of malaria that we have, which is due to dirty water bodies, address these through a sanitation revolution in India. It requires integrated planning. Okay, sanitation must work with other systems like water supply, solid waste management, housing. You can't just do toilets over here, then say, now what do I do about the pipelines, and do that next year, and then say, now what should we do about the treatment plant? Yeah, let's do something 2-3 years from now. No, we need a plan. And the more urban our cities are, the more integrated planning matters. Otherwise, you're just building stuff and breaking it and rebuilding it, which is also a lot of what we see in India. Reform, so they think from a life cycle perspective, not just a capex perspective. They think about a holistic responsibility of building and operations, not just build it, spend the money, meet your budget, and who will operate it is is forgotten. So we have what we call the build, neglect, and then rebuild in India, right? And we need to break that and make sure that there's a holistic responsibility across the life cycle of an asset or of a service. Decentralized solutions require a lot more attention. This is education, training needs to be done, experiments need to be done, but ultimately somewhere there has to be a political will to try these out. There are enough pilots, there are enough experiments, there are enough proven technologies out there. Actually, like Delhi started talking about saying, no, we will do it. We need more people saying, yes, we will do it. And then you work backward and say, okay, what are the risks? What are the challenges? Let's plug those, right? Reusing treated water is urgent. I can't stress this enough. I call water one of the two dangerous single-use resources, right? The other being plastic. They're both polluting our environment and poisoning animals and people and killing lives. So we can't have single-use water anymore where we bring in water. Bombay today is bringing in water from 100 kilometers away, and it comes through your flush or your tap, and then boom, it's gone, right? Imagine how much money and energy is being spent on bringing the water to our tap. So reuse has to happen. It has to be enforced around it. Fecal sludge management is a rapidly emerging part of the toolkit. And it's a good partial solution because it only deals with black water, which is water from your toilets. It does not work very well for grey water, with water, and so on. I didn't quite get into that, but your septic tank is usually connected only to your toilet, and your taps, your wash basins, your kitchen, your bar, into some kind of open drain, because that is not as polluted as the toilet water. And in fecal sludge management, you only clean out the toilet water, treat it. So in a way, 99.5% of the water is anywhere being lost to the environment in the case of FSM. Because every few years when you open the septic tank, you take out a few thousand liters and have it treated, but all that other 99% of water has gone into the environment. And therefore, it's a partial solution. But considering that the black water is the most dangerous part, that has the fecal matter and the contaminants, if you do FSM well, you can handle the black water very well. So you're taking care of a big part of the problem, but not the whole problem. Okay. So with that, I would like to close Masterclass. I think we need to all focus. This is a Blue Water Company slide. I think we all need to think about treating and reusing wastewater. We need water security, bring pollution under control. We need to improve health in our cities, and ultimately we need more livable cities. We need beautiful cities. We need sustainable cities, resilient cities. Every time there's a flood in Bombay, all the sewage is on the road, entering people's houses, entering people's cars. This should become unacceptable in India today. I mean, this should not be as kind of infrastructure and service. And this doesn't mean just say the municipality, you have to do something. We all have to do it, right? Every housing society, every business, every commercial building has to play a role. And with that, we can make dirty water clean again, and that brings all the benefits to us across water, environment, sanitation, and health. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge to all of us. It's an honor to have you on this platform. I hope the people who are listening are motivated and will do something and something for their environment and for their water. So, also, I would like each and everyone who is listening to this platform right now. So, to stay updated to this initiative, please like us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And to join our initiative, you can fill out the form, which is given in the link below. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Stay happy, stay healthy.
And, and I'd just like to close by saying good luck. I think what you're doing is wonderful. I think there's a lot of knowledge sharing that is required. Panel discussions don't do justice to knowledge. So it's great that you invite share different aspects of their work. So good luck with it. Keep going. Keep doing that. I think we all need a lot of sharing ideas in education because we're up against challenges that we've not dealt with before. So thank you for inviting me. All right. Good luck.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care.